All right, welcome back. Hope you had a good lunch or dinner if you're in China. So we are gonna start this session. This session is gonna be about urban and public health, and will be chaired by um, Professor Lan Wang from Tongji University, and be co-chaired by Paige Chen of the University of Nottingham. So, ma'am, Professor, I give you the floor to control for the chairman.
Hello, everyone. Let's get started. I think we totally have 7 speakers, and each of you will have about 15 minutes. We will let you know that you are running out of time when you reach about 12 minutes, and then we will let you know when you reach 15 minutes. And hopefully we will have some time for discussion at the end. So let me introduce the first speaker, who is the head of the Department of Architecture and Built Environment in Ningbo campus, University of Nottingham, and Professor Ali. And his presentation is titled Post-COVID-19 Transformations in the Built Environment. Professor Ali, the floor is yours. You may start. Thank you. I'm not sure. It's just me or everybody. The sound is not.
We can't
I
hear
think
you.
there might be a bit of a mic problem.
If you don't mind, I'll switch off the cameras. I think that would be easier. Is it better now?
All right, that's great.
Yeah. Hello? Yeah, okay, I'll probably do that because I think it's just the coordination between the two devices is not properly. Thank you for the introduction, Professor Wan. Thank you, organizers, for your invitation. I'll probably struggle with this. Let me just a second. I have two screens, so I'll have to separate the screens. Yeah, I'll probably do it like this. Is this okay?
Yeah, I think we can use this. I mean, we can see it well.
Yeah, or perhaps I can change the other one. Sorry, just a second. Thankfully, I'm not going to talk about technologies, or else that would be a disaster. Okay. So I'll probably start now. So good day to everyone. I wouldn't say good morning or good afternoon because I'm sure people are all over the different places, different countries. I'm going to talk about post-COVID-19 transformations, although I'm not sure if post-COVID-19 is a thing yet. So according to Singaporean government, so this pandemic would last for another 2.5 years. So we are not halfway through. And then according to my conversation with my mom, I'll see her in 2035. So that's quite a long way that we may go. So I hope to be optimistic and hopefully that it would finish earlier. So, but having said that, hopefully post-COVID-19 transformation could be something sooner than later. Just to briefly start, I'm based in China, so I've been here for almost 10 years. I'm head of Department of Architecture and Built Environment, and I'm also a specially appointed professor in Hiroshima University in Japan. Over the past couple of years, especially I think the past 2 years, or perhaps in the past 2 years, we've been switching quite a lot from writing papers to writing books, and a couple of books I would like to touch on in this presentation are related to this pandemic. So I will briefly talk about one of them, which was the first one. In fact, I believe this is the first full monograph which was published on COVID-19 last year. This was when I developed the urban resilience toolkit, which was applied in the context of Ningbo in China, and it was utilized in the city's resilience and city management planning. And as a result of that, I think I managed to hopefully have an impact on supporting the local government in managing the pandemic at the city level at its very first stages or first few weeks. So it was quite an immediate response, and from the resilience toolkit development, it led into a whole book of 320 pages. So we had time, so I think it was a good time to keep writing. But I think the one I like to touch on more is about the one I've written recently. It's going to be published next month, and it's on urban health, sustainability, and peace. And I intentionally mentioned in the day the world is stopped, which is the pandemic, I would say, and I gave reasons of how we can consider the day the world is stopped. And in here, I talk more about transformations, and I wrote quite a bit about different aspects of how the nexus between health, sustainability, and peace is still missing in the built environment in particular, but also how this research could be taken further into future research. And I do believe, after I think 10 to 12 years of studying sustainability or researching sustainability, that peace has become probably more important, and the nexus between peace and health has become more important, or should be more important than ever. I do believe, as research transformations, I think after studying this peace and sustainability nexus with health, I think we are moving towards more of a peace and sustainability research, hopefully after the pandemic. And I think this pandemic enabled us to really address these issues, at least reflect on these issues. And from my research, I rather look into the other side of the coin, looking into different aspects that we struggle in cities or the built environments. In particular, from this image, you can see that everyone says we are in the same storm, or we are all in the same ship. But the reality is that no, we are not, and we are not experiencing the same storm, and we are not in the same ship. Different sectors are hit differently, and the built environment as a sector or as a discipline is also hit quite differently as well. So I don't think we are in the same ship, and I would say the transformations and transitions would differ sector to sector. But also, I think based on my earlier studies perhaps of the pandemic, we are expecting to have more shift towards resilience enhancement. And I think that's something, unfortunately, could have picked up much earlier, about 10, 12 years ago. And I think we were amongst the first who studied resilient cities, and we developed a toolkit, a project led by Siemens and Arup in 2012. And unfortunately, at the same time, we had the topic of smart cities, which was it was a hot topic at that time. It was just new, and unfortunately, resilient city or resilience thinking didn't pick up as much. And now we are in the pandemic, but the big pandemic, we realized that actually resilience thinking or urban resilience are quite important in how we can make our cities to be safer. And I try to address this quite a lot in our recent studies and recent papers. In one of the earlier papers I wrote about, we've written about maybe 15 to 20 papers on the COVID-19 or related to COVID-19 studies or different type of discussions. But I think the first one perhaps was on when I developed this adaptive thinking or adaptive measures for public places. And it was an early response, and City and Society Journal managed to publish it quite fast, quite nicely, and unlike other journals. So I think this was quite an early start for me to get into more publications or more research on the relationship between COVID-19 and the built environment. And here I summarized few adaptive measures, going back to what other scholars have already developed back in 1980s on adaptive thinking and how it was then brought into planning and the built environment sector. And I think it's quite an important area to look into, and how we can look into adaptive measures and adaptability of our built environment. Again, the paper is, I think, openly available. If not, please do let me know. I'm more than happy to send it through. Then other studies focused on transformations and transitions. I summarize a couple of them here. Unfortunately, there were interesting stories with these papers. When I submitted these papers, the journal said it's too early to write about these type of transitions or transformations. And when we parked the papers and submitted after 4 months or 5 months, then the same journals got back to us saying that oh, this paper, this type of studies is already exploited, and we don't need this type of papers. So I think the typical attitude by journals, which was quite annoying. Eventually, we managed to get few of them published, and we have few of them under review still. What we looked into transformations, particularly looking into how this pandemic has shifted some of the gradual transitions to become perhaps immediate transformations. And we focused on how this is helping to boost digitization, digitalization, and system thinking in the built environment. It's a paper which was published on that area, specifically looking into the impact of the pandemic on boosting those three aspects. I think more I would touch on the other one, which was published by Journal of Urban Management earlier in the year, where we looked into revisiting the built environment, and we engaged with some industries and governmental and representatives and academic members to come up with potential development changes and paradigm shifts that are expected because of the COVID-19. Explicitly, we looked into two sectors of construction and built environment, and then we developed a methodological framework of some sort that how this stakeholder engagement enabled us to pick on those particular elements or areas. And as a result of that, we developed some expert-led analysis. We weighed some of these analysis, and we developed matrix, which I'm going to summarize a few of them later. And as part of that, we developed at least an early understanding. This was actually written about a year ago, published in January 2021. But we looked into some of the early conceptions or thoughts of how these transitions are then changing to potential transformations if the pandemic finishes anytime soon. So based on this, we had 50 participants from different industries, academia, and from the government agencies from different countries. This enabled us not to have a biased decision on our results. So this was not so technical compared to other papers or other talks in this session, but we tried to give an early understanding of what the industry thinks, or what the transformations are happening or expected to happen from their perspective. And the idea was to create a matrix, which I'm summarizing it here, for each industry. So 6 primary areas were pointed out from the industry and from those who were engaged in this particular research. And we had 5 main factors, which was finalized with analysis of a larger group of stakeholders. So resilience, health, policy, practices, and perspectives came up as the top 5 factors that could be considered in potential transformations or transitions that may happen. And based on the analysis we had, we looked into what sectors would be, or what areas in each of these sectors would be affected. So in construction industry, we realized that these 6 particular areas are of the top interest, let's say, from the industry, governmental agencies, and academic perspective. So knowing that, the same also we did for the built environment sector, and again the same factors were studied across 6 primary built environment areas. Again, the measurements were then medium, high, and low were the ones that were assessed by the experts in the area, a larger group of experts. And after the assessment, we came up with an understanding that we are likely to have some directions that may happen and after the pandemic, or at least during the pandemic. And also we looked into some literature to back up these arguments. So in construction, especially from the transport engineering, we looked into how we are expected to have a decline in car-based transportation infrastructure. Not necessarily the transportation itself, but hopefully the infrastructure is expected to change. From the transportation perspective, our other studies we've done shows that actually the car-based transportation is increasing, at least in the country, like in China, and I'm sure elsewhere as well. So there's a big decline on public transportation at the moment, and this is going to be a big issue which would probably last for some time. In the construction industry, from the construction management point of view, there was a notification that there would be a push for information-based construction. which is already picking up quite fast. So we have, like for example, in our education, our site visits can happen virtually, and we have the use of information-based construction management approaches are picking up quite fast in a country like China, and I'm sure this would happen elsewhere as well. From the experts' opinions, we see that there is an increase in off-site construction and engineering, which other papers already also verified the same thing as well, which we have noted that this is picking up quite fast in terms of, which was already in a transformation, in a transition, but I think this is becoming more transformative change, probably after the pandemic. We expect to have an increase in lightweight structural systems, and something which we anticipate to happen mainly because of having the smaller rooms, which is also mentioned in the built environment sector from the built environment experts. And we do expect, this is probably a longer term plan, but I think or longer term vision perhaps, to have opportunities for new materials for performative installations. I think insulation was a big issue, especially in the residential sector, where we did some studies as well, where we looked into the issues of the residential compounds and how, for example, and these studies have been done in previous pandemics as well, where we have, for example, noise transferability between the walls is an issue, especially when people are in lockdown. So I think this insulation can come up into not only for residential buildings, but also for office buildings elsewhere as well. In the built environment, we looked into, there would be revisions in density and compact design, something which I personally disagree with many researchers that they say density doesn't matter, but actually density matters. A lot of the studies, or few studies, have been published in this area already, arguing that density is not a problem. Yes, on its own is not a problem, but when density is coupled with something else, then that's a problem. So density with poverty, density with lack of hygiene environments, and density coupled with everything, basically. Negative could become a negative thing. So I personally disagree with those papers or those scholars who argue that density is not an issue, and that actually density is an issue. So I think we would see more revisions on density and compact design. Already this is happening in China. So immediately after the first few months of the pandemic, the Chinese government announced that no new buildings are allowed to be more than 500 meters in terms of the height. So we do expect to see some of these happening quite fast. And in China, this has happened. So China is not allowing any more tall buildings more than 500. 500 meters is quite high already, but we were on a path that we are going to have a kilometer long or plus tall buildings or towers, but this hopefully has stopped such type of approach to urban design or compact design. Then we do believe from the studies and from the expert opinions, in the paper we elaborated quite a lot on this, on the spatial planning considerations in terms of public design and how spaces are going to be designed in a different way. And I also picked on this on the earlier paper on adaptive planning as well. We are anticipating towards more small individual internal layouts, and this is already happening in terms of how spaces are divided and how spaces are utilized in many places now. We are expected to have a push towards mesoscale strategies at neighborhood and community level, where we can see a bigger scope of development in the built environment sector. And also, as we have seen in China, quite rapidly, new opportunities are coming up for non-centralized building systems, in particular for air conditioning systems. So these were mainly the summary I think I would like to summarize in this particular talk. Just before I finish, I would like to invite everyone who's around and who would like to attend. We would have an event in November on a smart resilience strategies and sustainable assessment for future communities, which is happening in November in Ningbo or online. If you are in China, that would be great to have you with us in our campus in Ningbo. And for that, I would like to thank you all, and I hope I've